just a dry lake bed out in the middle of nowhere. But when the Eisenhower administration was interested in trying to get more information about what was going on in the Soviet Union, what kind of aircraft were they flying, were they building atomic missile bases, that sort of thing, the best that we could come up with was reconnaissance aircraft that would actually make illegal incursions into Soviet territory at a fairly low altitude to try to grab as many photographs as they can before they were shot down or spotted by radar or whatever. So the Eisenhower administration decided that they were going to bring in their best scientists to try to develop an aircraft that could fly at a much higher altitude than the Soviet missiles could reach to shoot it down. So in order to do this, they needed a location to build and to test out and ultimately use as a base to fly out of this new type of technology. So they decided upon an area in Nevada called Groom Lake, which was a dry salt bed lake. Now, the thing about it is that it was also pretty close to some of the areas where they were doing above-ground testing of atomic weapons, which kind of worked somewhat in their favor because this land was already owned by the government. So, Area 51 is the common name given to this remote detachment of Edwards Air Force Base. So when they decided to build it and to make use of this dry lake bed, because that's perfect runway, the first aircraft that was developed was the U-2, which, if you've seen pictures of it, it's this really unusual looking aircraft that got these huge long wings. And the U-2, because of these long wings, it had the ability to fly way, way above any commercial or even military aircraft. And so it was at Groom Lake, Area 51, where the U-2 was developed and test flown. And there's a very good possibility that civilian airline pilots who saw this unusual-looking aircraft flying in and out of the area may have thought that they were looking at some kind of UFO. And, of course, the military and the CIA tried to prevent any talk coming out from these pilots, from this area. But I think at some point somebody got the idea, well, let's just go ahead and let them report them as UFOs. We'll say, oh no, you were seeing weather balloons or what have you, but the sheer connotation that somebody was reporting a UFO at that time, even still today, was enough to put that giggle factor into it. Like, oh yeah, you saw a UFO. So, any other information that came out about it wouldn't be taken seriously because, these were the pilots who saw a UFO.
Right.
All right? So, that probably is one of the earliest connotations with Area 51, Groom Lake, and the association with UFOs. Now, I had said a little bit earlier that Groom Lake was fairly close to the areas where they were doing above-ground atomic testing. Now, what would happen, the personnel who were located at Groom Lake, they were still conducting these atomic tests after Area 51 was being built, had been built and was manned. So if a test was going on, they would just warn the personnel there, maybe a few minutes before the bomb would go off, and everybody would have to take cover. That was the cavalier attitude that they had at that time when it come to people and atomic testing. Some of these blasts were so severe that buildings on the base of Area 51 were damaged. There was windows shattered, doors were buckled. Unfortunately, we don't know what the long-term effects of exposure to the radiation to the personnel stationed at the base. The veil of secrecy surrounding Area 51 made sure that no information would ever get out. But no doubt that years later, the people who were working on, in this base, especially in the late 1950s, probably ended up with various kinds of cancers.
Oh, yeah.
Due to the exposure to this radiation. I mean, they were downwind from a lot of these tests, and these tests, especially in the 50s and 60s. I mean, we're not just talking about say like the equivalent of bombs that were dropped on say Japan or Hiroshima. These were very massive atomic blasts.
Hey, now, so, Tim, too, didn't they have even like service personnel standing and watching them? With goggles and stuff, just I'm just wondering how many of the military, troops that, were forced to watch the blast and all that stuff. How much of them, when they got in their 40s and 50s, started dying off of all kinds of cancers?
Well, all you have to do right now is, you can go on YouTube and find these films that have been released that show these soldiers very close. I mean, I'm not quite sure how close they were, but they would they'd have them like dig a foxhole and get into it, and then they'd blow up the bomb, and then the guys would get out, and you'd see them actually walking towards the blast area, after the initial concussion had gone by, and that they were being irradiated.
Oh, yeah.
Severely irradiated. But unfortunately, all of the information is classified when it comes to the personnel involved. We have no idea who these men were, and we have no idea about the future, they're down the road, what kind of medical conditions would developed because of this exposure, not only to the initial blast, but then the fallout that would come down almost immediately afterwards. And that's the same thing goes with Area 51. During the Clinton administration, there was actually some families who sued the United States government to try to get not only an admission that Area 51 was, existed, that it was there, but to release documents because there were personnel, sometimes civilian personnel, who were on the base who were exposed to toxic material that was just being burnt in pits close to the base. That's how at that time they would get rid of material, toxic material. They'd just dig a pit with a bulldozer, throw these drums of whatever it was into it, and then set it on fire. And people on the base close by were exposed to the smoke of God knows what that was being burnt. Unfortunately, at that time, since Area 51 was not publicly acknowledged to actually exist, their cases were thrown out of court. So you had these poor people who were suffering from these debilitating illnesses that took them out fairly quickly. Yet they had no not only did they have any recourse to try to get any kind of compensation from the government, they were denied health care benefits because they couldn't prove that the conditions that they were suffering from was due to an exposure to this toxic material. It was a very, very, very sad situation. And, and in fact, it wasn't until 2013 that the government even, kind of like a half-hearted acknowledgement that yes, Area 51 did exist, even though most of us knew back in the 1980s that there was some kind of secret base, located out there. I mean, it was referred to as Dreamland or Papoose Lake or what was it? Paradise Ranch was one of its earlier names that was given kind of, I think, sarcastically because the CIA was attempting to get people to come out there to work, and they were having a hard time of it because it was just so off the beaten track, and there wasn't a lot of luxuries there. So I mean, they even went as far as to have like parties where they serve pie and things like that. To try to convince workers that this is the great place that you're going to want to work at. Now that's changed a lot. I mean, you have daily flights, Janet flights as they're called, coming out of Las Vegas airport that'll take the workers who live in Las Vegas to work at Area 51, and then when the day's done, they're flown back again. So I mean, that's before that, you'd have to take you really couldn't even take a bus. You would have to work, in the base for say like a month at a time, and then you'd get maybe a week of R&R back in Las Vegas, and then you'd have to go back again. Your family would stay, say, in the Las Vegas area, and you'd have to work a month in Area 51. So a lot has changed since that time.
Oh yeah. So we got about 2 minutes before break, just to warn you. But it's interesting, how it started. I also heard rumors. Art Bell was a friend of mine. Who's no longer with us, but he used to talk on a show all the time that they would even bust the workers in, or at least some of them, onto Area 51 from, Pahrump and stuff like that. I don't know. I know going and seeing Art in Pahrump, I tell you what, it was really hot.
Hot and out in, like I said, out in the middle of nowhere.
I almost got busted. I went on to Area 51 myself. I got a day early going over to see Art one time back years ago, and he wasn't home. So me and my son or two sons, I can't remember, we decided, well, let's just go up close to Area 51 and see if we can get any pictures. And we talked to the guy, and he says, well, you take this road, but don't go past the mailbox. And okay, well,
the black mailbox.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that was the last one, but the road kind of went down to like a dirt road, narrow, and kind of was like on the side of a hill. And I went in on a ways, and all of a sudden I saw this vehicle coming the other direction fast as it could. And I remember shoving it in reverse and getting out of there, and thank God I didn't get caught.
Well, you're lucky the sheriff wasn't waiting down the road for you, because that's what generally happens.
Oh yeah.
If you get away from the wagon hut guys, then the local sheriff is there to take you in.
Well, the sheriff would be a lot better than the other people. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
So when we get back from the news break, and it's the last one during the show, what more are we going to touch on? Because I know that it keeps getting more exciting with all the advanced aircraft and all that stuff that was tested in Area 51 through the years also.
All kinds of interesting things we can talk about in the last half hour.
Okay. Well, everybody, again, we got Tim Swartz on. We're talking about Area 51, how it originated and all the way up to kind of current. And then tomorrow it continues on